Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we have pulled the sources on a band that manages to sound like both a controlled demolition and some kind of mathematically precise machine.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating combination.
We are doing a deep dive into Zeni Geva, that's for our Japanese listeners.
Yeah.
A historically significant, ridiculously influential, and I think often overlooked titan of Japanese experimental noise rock.
For sure. For over 30 years, the entire trajectory of this band has been defined by this constant but highly structured tension.
Right.
Their entire output is really built on the collision of three core elements.
Yeah.
You've got violence, precision, and this strange kind of structural beauty. It's extremity, but it's channeled through an incredible amount of rigor.
So our mission today is to figure out how that seemingly contradictory formula actually works. How did Zeni Geva manage to synthesize noise, these metallic guitars, destructive rhythms, and deep structure into a sound that became so essential for the global underground?
Well, the entire operational philosophy, it really centers on their founder and constant leader, Keike no or Kazuyuki Kishino. You have to see him as a composer first.
Okay.
His whole sonic architecture blending, harsh noise, complex electronic textures, hyperstructure, that's the core thread holding Zeni Geva together no matter who else is in the band.
And the name itself is maybe the most potent mission statement we've run into in a while.
It really is.
Zeni means money or coin, right? In Japanese. And Java comes from the German word Gewalt, which means violence or force.
So you get money violence. They are embedding this potent socio-political concept right into their name from the absolute start.
It's not just noise for noise's sake.
Not at all. It's not just pure sound art. It's noise with a critical edge. It's attacking the relationship between commerce and aggression. And that is a powerful, powerful foundation for a sound that is just inherently hostile.
Okay, so let's unpack this history. We should start in 1987. Keike formed Zeni Geva, but he was far from starting from scratch.
No, not at all. That background is critical because he was already deeply established in the Japanese noise and experimental scenes through groups like YBO2.
So what does that tell you?
It tells you that Noel wasn't just like a punk musician who picked up a guitar. He was already thinking cross-sectionally, noise, hardcore, the avant-garde.
And you hear that right away.
Immediately. In those early works like How to Kill in '87, you hear the unique blueprint. They were building on noise rock and hardcore, for sure, but they immediately showed those defining elements.
Which are?
Highly repetitive structures, these destructive cyclical riffs, and the very first hints of mathematical, odd time signatures. They were trying to break the mold before they even found their definitive lineup.
And that early sound gets a pretty significant turbocharge in 1988 with the addition of Mitsuru Tabata on guitar.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just adding another guitar player. This is a foundational change.
This is the creation of their signature weapon, right? The dual guitar attack.
The overwhelming dual guitar attack. Tabata's presence immediately amplified the sheer sonic mass, the density, where before it was angular, now it was just crushing.
And that setup allows them to do more complex things.
Exactly. It lets them layer and play these complex counterpoints against each other, creating that structural complexity that separates them from, standard noise rock.
Okay, but structure doesn't always translate into international fame, especially not in this genre. So how did Zeni Geva break out of the Japanese underground and become this global reference point?
That's the major turning point, and it arrives in 1991, the collaboration with the legendary American engineer and producer Steve Albini.
The anti-producer.
The anti-producer, exactly. He's known for capturing the true sound of the room, raw, direct, unpolished.
I need to know why that was the perfect match. What was it about Albini's philosophy that complemented Zeni Geva's intense metallic violence?
It was a perfect synergy because Albini's method refuses to smooth anything out. His dry, direct capture amplified Zeni Geva's metallic overtones and their unique dynamic range.
So the sound wasn't mixed, it was documented.
That's the word. The guitars sound like sheet metal tearing. The bass drops out in these specific, intentional ways that just emphasize the rhythmic violence. And this collaboration resulted in Total Castration in 1991. That album became their definitive representative sound for the global community.
So if the original goal was money violence, the Albini production gave that violence a physical, metallic sheen that could translate across borders.
Precisely. And they capitalized on it quickly. Just 2 years later, you get Desire for Agony in '93, released in the U.S. by Alternative Tentacles.
Jello Biafra's label.
Yeah, which confirms their deep roots in that global punk and experimental scene. They were being embraced by the same community that was elevating bands like the Jesus Lizard or Shellac.
And their reputation was cemented by, I mean, maybe the most powerful validation you could get in underground music history, the John Peel session.
That appearance was a massive global boost. Peel didn't just play a track. He spent real airtime praising their structural rigor and their unique intensity.
And his endorsement was everything.
It was the ultimate cultural stamp of legitimacy. It proved that their calculated noise could resonate powerfully with serious listeners all across Europe.
So for listeners who want to hear the absolute peak of that early 90s high-impact sound, which album should they go for?
Our sources consistently point to Freedom Bondage from 1995, also an Albini production.
Of course.
This is cited as the record where they achieved the most balanced yet brutal integration of their sound, the structural integrity, and that pure, unbridled violence. It's the high water mark of their raw, destructive era.
That mid-90s period sounds like just maximum velocity. But as the millennium approached, we see this shift into a period of deeper experimentation, maybe less outright aggression and more sonic sculpture.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
How did they evolve beyond that peak violence?
Well, the evolution starts, as it often does, in the rhythm section. They moved away from the more standard polyrhythmic drumming of the mid-90s. They briefly worked with Blake Fleming, but the long-term addition of Masataka Fujikake really changed the game.
What specifically did Fujikake bring that pushed those structural boundaries?
He brought rhythms that were faster, significantly more complex, and much more multi-layered. This change basically encouraged KK Null to expand the structural scale of the compositions themselves.
So the songs got longer.
Significantly longer. You start finding tracks that stretch beyond 16 minutes. And the focus shifted away from straightforward rhythmic assault toward dense, detailed counterpoint riffs between Null and Tabata's guitars.
So they weren't just using two guitars for volume. They were using them to play these interlocking, almost dissonant patterns against each other, like musical gears grinding.
Exactly. It became about texture and relational structure. And this is also the period where Null's electronic elements expanded dramatically. He brought in his unique device, the Nulltron. This all culminates in the 2001 album, 10,000 Light Years.
Okay, tell me more about 10,000 Light Years. Our notes call this a mature work where the band presents itself as an acoustic sculpture. That's a very abstract concept for such an aggressive band.
The metaphor of acoustic sculpture means the music is less about momentum and more about dimension and density. The electronic textures, the pure noise, the metallic guitar, those complex odd time signatures, they all interlock to create a structure that you almost feel three-dimensionally.
So it's not a journey, it's an object.
It's a jagged, overwhelming object. It required every bit of that structural discipline Null had developed over the years. It's a completely different kind of intimidating music than the raw chaos of their earlier work.
Okay, now let's get to the real heart of this deep dive. I need to know how they achieve that sound. For the listener who wants the engineering secrets, the actual mechanics of their violence and precision, what are the specific technical details? This is the aha moment.
All right, let's drill down. Their unique assault relies on the specific character of their riffs. First, they use repetitive low-end riffs that are cyclical. They just hammer you relentlessly, creating this foundation of dread.
Right.
Second, and this is critical, they use what are essentially cut-up-like key changes.
Wait, cut up key changes. How does that feel as a listener?
It creates total instability. Imagine the band establishing a crushing groove, and then, with no harmonic warning, no smooth modulation, the entire sonic structure just snaps and folds into a different, sometimes dissonant key.
It's a sudden jarring break.
A break in the middle of a perfect loop. It denies you any sense of comfort or resolution, only to snap right back into its aggressive, repetitive cycle.
So they're actively using structure to dismantle the listener's expectations.
Precisely. And all of this is built within a framework of non-44 time signatures. If most rock music is a steady march, 1, 2, 3, 4 Zeni Geva is deliberately forcing you into non-standard meters like 54 or 78. They make you step, trip, and constantly recalculate your footing.
They're using complex mathematics specifically to maximize the assault.
Yes. That structural math is what separates them from pure, unstructured noise. They are using rules to create maximum hostility. And you can see this in the drumming evolution. You can really divide their percussion into 3 phases. The initial phase was fast, aggressive, more hardcore-centric. The second, that 90s breakthrough era, was mathematical and polyrhythmic, perfectly supporting those Albini-era dual guitars.
And the final, most formidable phase.
That's defined by the 2009 Reformation. And that moment was marked by the return of Tatsuya Yoshida.
From the band Ruins, right?
The very same. If you don't know Yoshida, he is a legendary drummer who specializes entirely in complex, odd-metered, challenging mathematical rock. He's a master of impossible rhythms.
So what did he bring?
His approach is defined as ferocious and odd-metered, a maximalist structure that just perfectly complemented Null and Tabata's complex counterpoint. The rhythmic structure became overwhelmingly layered, which in turn forced the guitars to become even more precise in their attack.
It's interesting that despite all this structural rigor, the lyrical theme stays so focused on the band's original name concepts like money, violence, dominance, dismantling the body.
Well, the music is a visceral representation of those concepts. You feel dominated and dismantled by the structure itself. And throughout this entire history, we have to reiterate that the Albini recorded works established their definitive production aesthetic, that raw dynamic capture, amplifying those harsh, metallic overtones. That's their identity.
Okay, let's cover the hiatus and the rebirth. The band entered a period of stagnation between 2002 and 2009. What was Null doing then?
Null was hardly dormant. He just stepped away from the band context to focus heavily on his prolific solo career, expanding his electronic and noise collaborations all over the world.
So he was deepening his knowledge base.
Deepening his already substantial knowledge in pure electronic noise, which would only feed back into the band's sound later. And even though the band was quiet, we still got crucial archival releases, like Last Nanosecond Live in Geneva 2002, which came out in 2004.
But they didn't stay quiet forever. The 2009 reformation with Tatsuya Yoshida must have been a landmark moment in the underground scene.
It was a massive event. That reunion was immediately captured on the 2010 live album Alive and Rising, and that record showcases the full, undeniable impact of Yoshida's deviant drumming paired with that established, aggressive Null and Tabata guitar confrontation. It really reignited their live activity.
So, to bring this story full circle, if we position Zeni Geva within the context of the Japanese underground, what's their ultimate historical role? Where do they land?
They hold an almost unique position as this crucial junction point. They are one of the very few acts to successfully synthesize three distinct aggressive genres: noise, hardcore, and metal, all filtered through experimental music.
They're a bridge.
A cross-sectional presence. They bridge the Japanese noise culture of the 80s, the world of Merzbow, Null's own YBO2, with the international extreme metal and complex experimental scenes that came after.
So they didn't just participate, they became a standard bearer for how to channel sonic extremity through structural discipline.
And they earned that respect from the global underground entirely independent of any commercial concerns. That is the ultimate takeaway from their 30-plus-year trajectory. It's a history where those three initial elements, violence, structure, and experimentation, didn't just coexist, they constantly expanded in parallel.
KK&L took the chaos of noise and the aggression of metal
And forced them into a cage of intellectual rigor.
So what does this all mean for you as the listener now that you know this? Here's the provocative reflection. Zeni Geva's structured mathematical approach to noise and extreme music arguably anticipated and preceded many of the frameworks we now see in contemporary music.
It absolutely did.
When you listen to a highly complex, dissonant modern metal band or a harsh noise artist using rhythmic loops, you are hearing structures that Zeni Geva perfected decades ago.
They demonstrated that the most effective way to be extreme isn't through pure, formless chaos. It's through highly disciplined, destructive structure.
Exactly. This music, despite its age, remains remarkably current and brutally relevant. If you haven't yet, start with those Albini collaborations. That raw sound, delivered with maximum precision, is truly unforgettable and completely unforgiving. Dive deep.